David Fincher Part 2, 2000's. An interesting films here. We have Panic Room, Zodiac, and The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. Um,
Curious indeed.
Even more technical difficulties plague us. Man, we are just not lucky these past few weeks with technical difficulties. It has been
Oh,
rough.
what can you do?
One more month until we're in the same time zone, man, and then it'll be on the same internet, so it'll be a lot easier then. But anyways, my question was, do you believe that this is the time period that Fincher starts to become more of a well-known name? I know he obviously had success with Seven and Fight Club. Those were, two very big hits in the 90s. But do you think this is when he starts, people were like, oh, that's David Fincher, not just, hey, that's that guy who directed that movie?
Um, I think yes and no, because mainly because of like the effects of Panic Room are like so. I mean, if that movie came out today, people would be talking about it and its visual effects, and so I think I get the feeling that during this time, movies like Panic Room and Zodiac, probably put his name out there as like a, he wasn't just a one-hit wonder with a movie like Fight Club, or he was more than just a cult movie director. And then there was Benjamin Button, which got him a lot of Oscar nominations. I think for most people, and at least for us, we're still gonna have to wait until Social Network until we really get to, his full form. This isn't even his final form yet.
Yeah, that's a good point. The only reason I asked that is because a lot of people that I listen to and I read, at least, they say that Zodiac is one of, if not his best film. And while I don't agree with that sentiment, it's definitely up there. We'll get into that a little later. But I think also it's kind of
Yeah.
interesting to see up until Ben Button, where he has no Oscar noms, or he has like one or two Oscar noms in his films. I believe Alien 3 and 7 had Oscar noms. No, Fight Club, sorry.
Mm.
Um,
Mm.
and 7, sorry. Yeah. Up until then, he really wasn't a big, well-known name as far as, the casual audience, because, I'm not even trying to be mean about this, but the casuals really only follow who's nominated at the Oscars. And his name wasn't really there a whole lot. So I think with Button...
Not only that, I would also say that the content of his movies, I mean, he's not making like 4-quadrant movies over here.
Yeah.
He's making movies about serial killers and, gangs who beat people up.
Sure, yeah. No, valid point. Well, let's get started. Let's get into Panic Room. Came out in March of 2002, 76 on Rotten Tomatoes, 65 Metascore, 6.8 IMDb. Had a budget of 48 mil, grossed $197 at the box office. Pretty, for a run-of-the-mill, quote-unquote run-of-the-mill home invasion movie, that's a pretty decent return that they made. Yeah, what are your opening thoughts of this movie?
It was not that bad. I had heard people say that it was kind of a snooze fest. There are definitely parts of it that I thought were a snooze fest. Particular performances from particular actors with particular names like Jared Leto. But other than that, for me, the big takeaway, I think in terms of the cinematography, this is up to this point probably one of his best movies, even beyond Seven and Fight Club. In my opinion, for sure.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because he takes this simplistic formula, right? Home invasion. We've seen that around before, and we've continued to see that since. And he kind of adds his own flair to it, whether it's, I'm going to take the camera and I'm putting it in the damn wall and there's nothing you can tell me, or, I'm cutting a wall in half and you get to see both sides of the door and the characters interacting in real time instead of just shot over shot. I was very surprised the level of, like, I guess I shouldn't say surprised, but the Fincher pizzazz is definitely here and present in this film.
I mean, even then, I think for me, this movie is really also when his use of CGI really comes into fruition,
Mhm.
because a lot of these shots in this film are nearly entirely CGI. At least some of the tracking shots in this film. I mean, he takes full advantage of the fact that the camera will just go through walls or go through the banisters on the stairs, and it's like basically things that are impossible for a camera to do.
Mhm.
But he purposely does that, because the camera in this movie just likes to go from one point to another. It just floats back and forth. It doesn't really comment on anything. And the fact that it's willing to go anywhere and do anything gives it this really weird, like, intrusive feeling. I don't know if you felt that way, but there are a lot of moments where he will purposely, like, have the camera. It's unmotivated, but it will just, it's this, like, dolly shot where it will move past a wall or a door frame, and it's like you're just peeking your head around the corner is what it's supposed to look like. It's really, in my opinion, I think that was the best part about this movie, was just all the little ways in which he was trying to make you feel as unsettled as possible through the camera. Even up until the very final shot of this film, did you notice what was going on there?
With the when they're on the bench.
Yeah, it does the Jaws effect where it's a pull out, but they zoom in at the same speed as they do the pull out, and it creates this really unsettling parallax with the background. It's like, and what I love about it is that it's totally emotional.
Yeah.
It's just the characters are safe. They've gotten out of the house. The bad guys have been arrested. The bad guys have been dealt with, and they're just chilling on a park bench. But he does this camera move where you're just like, what the heck is going on?
Is everything
here?
actually okay?
This is unsettling and creepy. Yeah. I thought that was so smart and so cool, in my opinion. I love that part. But that's what I like about the movie. The CGI and the cinematography are great. Other than that, I probably wouldn't recommend this movie to anybody who wasn't watching all of David Fincher's movies in chronological order, like we are.
Yeah, the acting leaves a lot to be, and the actual screenplay leaves a lot to be desired. I think Foster is a little bit, I don't want to say miscasted, but she's kind of missing something. Leto is a Leto. He's a weirdo. I don't really like Leto. I don't think either of us like Leto that much. So having him in his role. Though I will defend him and say this was not egregious role. He can kind of come off as like sort of he's trying to do too much, which I think is a fair complaint. But I think it was a good foil for the other two robbers. Whitaker, I don't know. This is like a classic Whitaker, just stand there in the corner and be a foil to the crazy characters that he kind of does in his career. So it's nothing great, but it's nothing bad. The third robber, I just didn't like at all. I didn't even understand.
The guy who wore a mask all the time.
Yeah, I just didn't understand why he was there. I mean, I understood why he was there, but it just, I don't know. It just felt like we could have had at least a better actor or a different actor or something. But I don't know.
Yeah. Now let me get your opinion on this. Well, okay. First off, I'll say that in terms of the casting, I think Forrest Whitaker, like you said, he just stands there and he does his job, and I'm okay with that. He's never as like in the way as actors who are usually, typecasted in those
Sure.
roles. Cough, cough, The Rock. Um, Jared Leto, I think his character was just annoyingly cliche or boring. I think now here's the thing. I think Kristen Stewart was fine because she actually looked like a daughter to Jodie Foster. Um,
Yeah.
but with Jodie Foster in this kind of role, here's the thing: Jodie Foster usually plays very, very smart characters, right? Like I was just talking about Silence of the Lambs earlier, and she herself is a very smart person. But I feel like her big weakness is that she doesn't usually play emotional roles. Like in real life, I can't imagine her scared.
Yeah.
Like if she was in this situation, I feel like she would just be stone faced. And so for her to play this kind of role where it really feels like she's acting terrified, like I believe that she could do all those things. She could rewire a phone, or she can use Morse code to get someone's attention and whatnot. But for her to like pretend to be scared doesn't really suit her. I think they said that Nicole Kidman was originally cast in that role.
Yes.
Do you feel like that would have been better then?
Yeah, because I think we've seen Nicole Kidman act more emotional. I mean, she's a more emotional actress. So I think it would have been way better. I don't want to say way better, but I think we would have had something more to Nicole Kidman. I also never felt like Jodie Foster. She was a mom, which if the whole point of this film is a mom and a daughter being trapped, you kind of have to nail the actress being a mom.
Yeah.
And I just never got any like sympathy or compassion from Jodie Foster for Kristen Stewart. Obviously, you could say the actors just didn't have any chemistry or whatever, but I feel like that's the whole movie. That's what it's supposed to be about. And would Nicole Kidman have done a better job? Maybe, probably. But like I said, I don't think Jodie Foster is the worst actor of the bunch, and I don't think it's not an egregious casting decision, but for a director who usually nails every single one of his castings, this one was kind of a letdown, for sure.
Was it the Game or Seven where Jodie Foster, you said, was originally supposed to play?
It was the Game. She was gonna be Michael Douglas's originally daughter and then sister, and then she got cut out.
Oh yeah, true. So maybe she got cast in Panic Room because it was kind of like, sorry, we cut you from the movie.
Yeah, well,
who knows?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know. Nicole Kidman does make an appearance though. Did you know that?
Yeah, she's on the phone.
Yeah, I thought that was cool.
When they call the husband and the mistress answers the phone, it's Nicole Kidman.
She has a credit and everything.
Nice. So yeah, there really wasn't. Okay, now here. Okay, let me get your opinion on this, because this is something I think that kind of runs through David Fincher's career. He has said that he doesn't want to have a perfect filmography, and that he is totally fine just making movies to entertain people. He has also explicitly said that Panic Room is one of those movies where he said that he knows it's not high art. Mm-hmm. He just wants it to entertain people. Do you agree with that? His own assessment of his own movie?
This was I like to call these the mid-afternoon specials, where it's 3 p.m. You're home from school, and this is on an HBO or Cinemax or Stars or whatever.
It's on FX or
FX. And you're just like, well, there's nothing else better to watch right now because it's 3 p.m. on a weekday. Nobody's home, nothing good is on, so let's just put on this movie and I'll just watch it. You kind of have it as background noise. Maybe it's on Netflix or something for free for a month or something, and you're just like, yeah, I'll check it out. It seems like a good movie. I mean, it's got a short runtime. I think it's a little under 2 hours, so it's not the most it's not gonna drain you to watch this movie, and it's not gonna take up too much time. But I agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think Fincher is very well known for being like one for you, one for me. I'll make a movie for the studio, and then you guys scratch my back, and I'm gonna make whatever I want. Um, and this is definitely a one for
Makes
you
sense.
kind of movie.
Yeah.
And I don't think it. I actually kind of respect it. Like just a guy who's just like, yeah, I just make movies just to make movies, and I'm not trying to be this pretentious high artist. Like I don't view myself as Michelangelo or Stanley Kubrick or
Mm.
Hitchcock, where I'm trying
Yeah.
to make high art every single time. It's like, dude, I got bills to pay. I got, I want to entertain at the end of the day, and yeah, this was a good. I was entertained. I was very entertained. I don't think it. I don't have any desire to go rewatch it unless it's like I said on one of the cable channels or somebody puts it on and I'm like, I'll stick around and watch it. But yeah. What about yourself?
I uh I agree that, well, okay, here's the thing. I respect the sentiment from David Fincher. And I mean, okay, he's a good director, and so if there was anybody who was just going to make middle tier movies, I would want them to be able to do it well. And he definitely does it well. I think the problem is that it's kind of like that, where I imagine my teachers would have felt this way, where you're like, this person has so much potential if they just applied themselves. Just, you could make Fight Clubs, you could be making Zodiacs, and here you are doing Panic Room, my guy.
You're making me giving me
Um,
PTSD from middle school math.
yeah, so that's how I kind of feel about it. Like, I respect it, but I've seen better.
Yeah, it's like when Matt
Um,
Damon decides to make The Wall. It's like, Matt Damon, we know you can act. We know you're good at what you do. Why are you in this crap movie? you know, kind of like that.
what can you do? I mean, I'll say this though, and at least he has this. David Fincher has this going for him. Any movie he makes, he still approaches it. He doesn't phone it in. Like the CGI in this film, the cinematography in this film was clearly done by somebody who still wanted you to pay attention to the film. They didn't want you to just show up, eat popcorn, check your phone every now and then leave. He still wanted to try to grab your attention. And I think I appreciate that David Fincher is the one directing these movies. If it was anyone else, then, like you were saying, it would have been shot, reverse shot in those scenes. It wouldn't just have been, cut the wall in half. He wouldn't, nobody else would have gone to those lengths. So I appreciate that David Fincher does that. I don't appreciate that he makes the movies, but nonetheless, that's just me.
Let me ask you this: did you have any issues with the final third of the movie? Because I sure did.
Not that I really remember. What were your problems?
I just feel like every decision once Leto died. Spoiler alert: Jared Leto dies.
It's not a spoiler. We all wanted it to happen.
Once Jared Leto, Jesus Christ, FBI, that was a joke. That was a joke, FBI. Once Jared Leto dies, everything that characters do in this movie is just kind of to serve the purpose of let's get this movie over with and not sensible. Like nothing about it makes sense. Like the most egregious example I can think of is Jodie Foster when the cop comes. The cop straight up is like, "Hey, if there's anything you need to say but can't, just like blink your eyes a lot." And she just looks at him straight eyed and is just like, "Can you get out of my house now?" I'm like, "What are you doing? Like your daughter is kidnapped, more or less, right? You're in a house with two people, one of them which has a gun. Like these are the only people that can help you, and you're just willing to throw like your husband is locked up in a chair. And these are the only people that can help you, and you booted them out, and then he comes back for no reason. Like what? Like that just to me that was just like what? Okay, we're just trying to end the movie. Like we're not actually trying to make sense anymore.
I can see it. Well, I can see it. I think just personally, it was one of those things where it's like, I wasn't expecting this movie to not have plot holes.
Sure.
I wasn't expecting this movie to, be watertight storytelling or anything like that. I mean, just the fact that there's no explanation whatsoever why Jared Leto even brought the third guy. I just kind of have to shrug my shoulders and be like, okay, this is a character who, I mean, you could make the explanation of she doesn't want her daughter to die, so if the cops show up, they're just going to kill the daughter, blah, blah, blah. If they're going to get arrested, what do they have to lose? But that would just, probably be giving it too much credit.
Yeah.
I don't know. Hey man, like David Fincher said, it's just a popcorn movie. Don't think about it.
Well, it's like you said, right? We expect more from David Fincher. We want to see more, especially with a movie that I think up until that point didn't really have a lot of plot holes. I mean, obviously the Jared Leto bringing on that third guy didn't make a whole lot of sense, but we could excuse it as just like, oh well, he's a friend or whatever. But for a mom who would, at this point, it seems like she would be willing to do anything to save her daughter, to just even to blow up the panic room with fire, or to light up the propane on fire just so they can stop drilling into the wall. It's kind of like, you're willing to turn down cops? I don't know. That just, when she did that, I was just like, oh, this effing bitch, like, so stupid. I was visibly upset by that. And I don't really get that visibly upset about character decisions, because I'm just like, oh, it's just screenwriting error. But yeah, I don't know. Any last words on Panic Room before I go into a big tirade?
No.
Cool. Let's move on to Zodiac. Came out. He had a little bit of a break. 5 years. Came out in 2007, March 2007. 89 on Rotten Tomatoes, 78 Metascore, 7.7 on IMDb. $65 million budget, $84 million at the box office. Kind of flopped. Actually, it did flop if it had a 65 budget. This is the first time I ever saw this movie in preparation for this episode. And it is everything I thought it would be and so much more. I am upset at myself for taking so long to see this movie because it is
nice.
As far as cop dramas go, as far as serial killer dramas go, as far as, whatever, it is one of the greatest crime dramas of this century, probably, the decade, definitely, of all time, probably as well. I was really, really impressed with what he did for a case that has never been solved, and there are so many open-ended possibilities of who it could be. For Fincher to just be like, no, we're going this way, and he did his own research too, which was pretty cool. Reading up on the making of this film, for him to just be like, we're going this way, and we're gonna do the best we can going this way. He does it surprisingly well. He's not super, conspiracy theory, aliens are coming for us, like that. You know how some movies where there's a lot of mystery as to who did it or why somebody did it or whatever. For him to pick an avenue is pretty cool.
Well, I'm glad you liked it.
And that's all on Zodiac. Now we're on to Benjamin, but no, I'm just kidding.
Okay, no, not at all. I can definitely say that, at least for me, this film is easily one of David Fincher's best films. I remember last week I was saying he has two magnum opuses, whatever the plural is. It's Zodiac and Zodiac is easily one of them. Easily, because this is the example of David Fincher. We know you can do better than this. We know you can do more. And then he does Zodiac, and you're like, yes, this is what we expect from you.
Yeah.
This is the kind of film that you work perfectly for. This is the kind of film where his his dark, moody lighting works perfect. His impartial and totally objective cinematography works perfect. His ability to just direct any actor works perfect because this is a huge cast and there's a lot of people in roles that you probably wouldn't think they would work in, and he just gets the best performance out of them. And yeah, it's just. And okay, so let's start here. First off, this film is actually kind of personal for David Fincher because he grew up in San Francisco at the time of the Zodiac scare.
Yeah, did you?
And there's the scene where they talk about the buses being followed by polices and by helicopters. Yeah. David Fincher has talked about being on those buses, and when he read that scene in the script, he was like, I was one of those kids. You know, my parents told me the Zodiac killer is going to shoot out the tires and shoot you up.
Did you hear the?
And he had to go to school that day.
Did you hear the story behind that though? So I guess
no, what's the story behind it?
I guess so. Fincher went to school and came back from school with a police escort or whatever. And Fincher told his parents like, "Hey, we had a police escort to him back from school." And his dad was basically like, "Oh, so you, was that because of the Zodiac killer? Like I heard he's gonna knock out a school bus." And Fincher was just like, "And you were gonna let us go to school about that? You were gonna let us go to school knowing that?" I think his dad was like a work at home kind of guy. So, I mean, there was no way, you know, he could definitely have picked up his kids. I just thought that was a funny little anecdote.
Dude, trust me, my parents would have been the same.
Oh, yeah. I think everybody's parents would have been the same.
But, yeah, no, I think that that's also part of why David Fincher really just went ham in this movie. He just did all the research. Well, him and the screenwriter James Vanderbilt, they both did a ton of research on this movie. Because I remember I listened to a podcast with James Vanderbilt where he talked about writing the first draft and how David Fincher almost immediately got involved because of how, you know, he had his own experience with the Zodiac. And then he talked about how, like, from the beginning, David Fincher was like, okay, we're going to film this on location, like legitimately where the murders took place. We're going to film it there. And I was like, oh, that's maybe a bit too dedicated to the story. When you film murder scenes at the actual locations the murders took place in real life. It's a little ominous. So actually, it goes one step further. The scene at the beach where the couple gets knifed, they get stabbed to death. None of this is a spoiler because it's a true story, so who cares? The couple gets stabbed to death at the beach. There's a tree in the background, like they're sitting underneath the shade of a tree. That tree had been removed over time. David Fincher had them plant a fully grown tree in the spot where it would have been historically at the time of the murders, just to make him look like it would in real life. I'm like, okay, this is clearly a movie that he is willing to put everything into.
You know what's weird about that too is this is a man who is he is not afraid to use CGI when necessary. You know, he uses CGI in this movie for the blood because cleaning up blood after a million takes would just be too time consuming. So he's not afraid to use. It's not like Nolan, right? He's not afraid to use CGI. He's actually really well known for it. And so for him to be like, no, we'll just plant a real tree. Like, what's the whole big deal? It's like, dude, you only have $64 million to work with. What are we doing here? Like, you gonna have him fly coach or what?
What I love too about this movie is how it is weirdly low budget because it was filmed mostly on HDR, which that's not even like professional film camera. Like that's not like 4K or 6K. That's like 1080p.
We can do that.
It wasn't entirely filmed. Yeah, it wasn't entirely filmed on HDR. Because there's slow motion and there's actual like scenes shot on film. But the majority of it was filmed on HDR. A lot of blue screen, way more than it looks like in this movie. David Fincher is one of those guys where he will blue screen like just a person's house in the background. and you wouldn't even think to do that if you were just watching it. But a lot of this movie was filmed on a soundstage. My favorite fact about the making of this movie, though, was that it was edited in Final Cut Pro, which is like, it might as well have been Windows Movie Maker. It's like,
Oh, that's funny.
seriously, yeah. Like when I hear that, I'm like, okay, that gives me more inspiration than all the other people
Well,
who are like, oh yeah, man, just use your phone. You can make any movie with your phone. I'm like, I don't care. Oh, David Fincher shot this film on HDR with a Final Cut Pro. That's inspirational right there.
yeah. Well, he spent all of his money on damn reconstructing downtown 1970s Los Angeles. So I mean,
Yeah.
you kind of have to,
Yeah, pretty
you have to
much.
cut scenes out. You have to cut some stuff out, and flying trees halfway across the country. Yeah, this film is something else. It is. I want to say it's a masterpiece, and it's a shame that it came out in 2007 because it was dwarfed at the Academy Awards by the big titans. There Will Be Blood and No Country for Old Men.
Yeah.
Because I mean, even if it came out a year prior, even a year later, obviously he had Benjamin Button a year later, but I mean, it's probably getting a couple noms at least as far as the screenplay and maybe art direction or something. But when you have a year like '07
Yeah, true.
dominating the way it did, it's kind of hard to get any
Traction.
Yeah, traction. Thank you. It's another interesting thing that I noticed, and I noticed this in this movie, and he comes back to it, many times. Is his use of visual bookends. So the first shot of this movie is Mike Mageau, I guess second victim. The first face we see is Mike Mageau, right, when he's young and he's getting in the girl's car. And then the last shot we see is Mike Mageau again, pointing out who he thinks the Zodiac was. And he does this again in Social Network with Jesse Eisenberg. He's with Rooney Mara, and then he's looking at Rooney Mara on Facebook.
Yeah.
And then he does this in Gone Girl with Rosamund Pike character, excuse me.
Where it's just her head.
And it's really smart filmmaking because it kind of just shows this snapshot, right? It gives it a definitive end.
Yeah.
Of, this is where I'm taking you. This is where our story begins and ends with this character and more or less their arc. I mean, Mike Mageau isn't really a huge character in this movie. We see him for probably like a total of 10 minutes from the 1969 and the 2000 or 1980 whatever. I just thought that was really smart, and I'm like, man, this is a guy who knows what he's doing because that is 100% intentional. What he's doing.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And
it's
just really smart, and this movie just really showcases the smart decisions that he makes, whether it's having characters. Once again, we have dual characters who play off of one another. First it's the Downey Jr. character and Ruffalo, the detective, one playing off one another, and then Downey Jr. gets fired, so now it's Jake Gyllenhaal taking over, and it's showing how this obsession of... Another thing that I noticed too is that this obsession with the case kind of impacted more lives than just the police. Like Downey junior basically kills himself over this, over getting death threatened. Gyllenhaal loses his kids and wife and kind of a piece of himself. Ruffalo loses his partner, and then his credibility when he's questioned as, did he write the last Zodiac letter? It's just, this is one of those movies where, I know I mentioned The Godfather as being like a smart, fundamental textbook film. This is, it's not on the level of The Godfather, but it's up there, man, as far as just smart filmmaking all the way down.
So let's pick something specific. How do you feel about the casting in this movie?
I actually
Because I'll ask you this: the first role that stands out for me is Mark Ruffalo.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is I'm not really a big Mark Ruffalo fan, but it's my two favorite films of his are this one and Spotlight. And he's basically playing more kind of the same character of like this obsessive guy who's trying to get the truth. And I think that's such a smart it's a smart character for him because he's very I don't want to say he's laid back, but he's not like Paul Avery, the Downey Jr. character, where Paul Avery's kind of digging his nose and where it shouldn't be dug. He's just kind of Ruffalo's more chillax and just looking at the bigger picture of things, and I think that's a really smart character for Ruffalo. Yeah, the only casting issue that I really had was probably Gyllenhaal, just because when I see Gyllenhaal, I see Gyllenhaal. Like I don't see the character of was Robert Graysmith.
Yeah.
So maybe could we have picked a younger actor? Maybe. I don't know. I also don't. I also don't buy him as a dad. But that's just personal decision.
Yeah, that I would agree with. I think though with Gyllenhaal, even though I kind of just see Jake Gyllenhaal and not a character, I still think he himself, just the way he looks, fits that type of character.
Yeah,
he has that like doe eye kind of innocence in the way that he looks in every scene. So I kind of believe it. Yeah, I think. I mean, for how many characters there and actors there are, I definitely think that David Fincher gets the best out of all of them. In my opinion, particularly for me, Robert Downey Jr., who hated working on this film. But David Fincher still got a good role out of him.
The story of the jars of urine?
Yes, I know that story.
So for our listeners, Downey Jr. would hide jars of urine around the set because he was basically he hated how Fincher does movies and directs movies because Fincher is notorious for taking numerous shots and takes. So he did that, and he had a quote. I can't find the quote, but it was he's basically like I'm paraphrasing here, but like I am perfect for. Oh, here we go. I just decided, aside from several times I wanted to garrote him, that I was going to give him what he wanted. I think I'm a perfect person to work for him because I understand gulags.
It's kind of harsh.
Oh man, that's crazy.
Jeez.
Yeah, so he really didn't like this movie, and I don't think Gyllenhaal. I think this kind of broke Gyllenhaal too, because Gyllenhaal says you get a take, 5 takes, 10 takes, some places 90 takes, but there's a stopping point. There's a point at which you go, that's what we have to work with. But we would reshoot things. So there comes a point where I would say, well, what do I do? Where's the risk?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I mean, here's the thing with Fincher, though, is that even though he takes multiple takes and he does, the Stanley Kubrick thing, he himself has contested that and been like, hey, look, I do it sometimes, but I'm not doing it all the time, which say about that what you want. Whether you do it once is bad enough, I think part of that for me, it's one of those things where I, as an audience and as somebody who knows it happens, it's like he still gets good performances out of actors, Like it works. Maybe I think if you're doing more than 10 takes on a scene, I would never do more than 10. Even on my own film, the short films I shot at school, I would never do more than like 5. But that's just me, man. Yeah. When I was a first AD on some film sets and they did more than 2, I'd be like, "Look, guys, you're really pushing it here."
I know, right? And then yeah, yeah, it was always fun to watch ads and director of photography, cinematographers, 'cause that seems to be the contentious relationship out of all the relationships
Oh
on
yeah,
set.
trust me.
Oh man.
Trust me. So let me ask you this then. What do you think about the actual story? Because I think here's the thing, and I'll throw my 2 cents in. The visual bookends work in this film, and even to a degree in Social Network, because the stories don't have any resolution.
Yeah.
Technically, the Zodiac killer is never caught. Now, the film ends with a conclusive character arc for Robert Graysmith. He finds who he believes to be the Zodiac killer. But the expectation I think most people would have is the movie ends with the Zodiac killer, getting thrown in jail. But that can't happen because
he's dead.
Didn't happen in real life. He's dead.
Or so we think.
At least by now, everyone who was ever accused of being the Zodiac is probably
I don't
dead.
know, man. Ted Cruz is still alive. He's still a prime suspect.
Oh, I forgot about that.
That's all I could think about. I was like, how the hell did they think Ted Cruz is the Zodiac killer?
That's hilarious. Anyway, your thoughts.
My thoughts. It's an interesting story where there's no real, like, we have a character arc, but at the same time we kind of don't, because like you said, there's this feeling of we never solved the case. We never got him. Obviously the Robert Graysmith scene at the end where he stares down Lee, people interpret that as like, oh, I got you son of a bitch, but it's like there's nothing you can do about it. And that's why the diner scene with Ruffalo and Gyllenhaal, that's probably my favorite scene in the movie, where they're just like, where everything is starting to click for Ruffalo, but Ruffalo's just like, we can't do anything about this, man. And that's when Gyllenhaal gives the perfect line of, just because you can't prove it doesn't mean it's not true. And I'm like, holy crap. I was like, man, that's smart. But you know what's also smart about this movie is this movie is not about, I mean, it's about a serial killer, but he's not the main focus. The main focus seems to be the obsession that these officers had. And, they were so obsessed with catching this guy that they kind of had a lot of oversight as far as like catching this guy. I mean, one of the examples is the taxi cab murder. 2 officers walked right past, or drove right past him, and didn't even bother. Well, what we think is who was the Zodiac killer, but they didn't even bother to stop the guy who, they eventually figured out was the guy. They were giving out quick response of like, oh, we actually think it's a black guy, not a white guy, and everybody's like, what? No, it's definitely a white guy. We have a lot of witnesses. So they had to go back, but before, they had to go back and say like, no, we think it's a white guy. But by that point, everybody was already looking for a black guy, so the white guy could take off. The actual killer could take off. The scenes of trying to get the warrant and trying to look and trying to kind of corner Lee, but Lee seems to be one step ahead of him. It's like, man, you guys really, like, you guys missed a lot. And with that scene where, I think the diner scene really emphasizes that point too, when Gyllenhaal is like, where did Darlene work at? She worked at the what was it, the burger restaurant or something like that, right? She worked at a restaurant. She was like a waitress, right? The drive-in. He's like, Darlene worked at the drive-in, and Lee lived across the street in his mom's basement, 50 yards away. And then Ruffalo's like, Jesus Christ. I'm like, how do you not, like, how does that, the first thing you don't, like, compartmentalize, And I was like, the first thing, like, okay, let's know, let's check the suspects, everybody who lived around the suspect, everybody who knew the suspect, How is that not the first thing that you recognize? And I don't know if that was a real life thing. I'm assuming that's a real life thing because the Robert Graysmith, the real life Robert Graysmith, actually worked, was a consultant on the film. So I'm assuming that's a real thing that happened.
Mm-hmm.
But it's just so smart to focus more on the incompetency of the police versus them actually just like a cat and mouse game of them trying to chase. I thought that was really well done.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I really love this film, because it's its own twist.
Yeah, it's, what I love about the story of this film is how it's basically entirely exposition without any payoff. But the fact that like it is just exposition the whole way through is what makes it so compelling, because you really have to pay attention to every piece of information. And it's not like most films where the exposition is just here's information, blah 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 blah, it's probably not going to be important later. This film does a good job of every new fact they learn about the Zodiac feels like it's, a mini climax in the scene. Like if you had your exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, every new piece of every conversation follows that, and that's why it's interesting the whole way through, because you're always coming across, like that diner scene is a perfect example where it's like you have the exposition of here's the fact, the rising action of what does this mean, and then the climax of the reveal of it means that he, you put it together yourself. Mm-hmm. The fact that he lived, 50 yards away.
He knew her, yeah.
However, 50 feet, yeah. I think that's what makes this movie to me so compelling. But yeah, it's just such a good movie. It's just a good crime movie.
Have you read the book?
No, I kind of wanted to afterwards. I mean, I don't like true crime personally.
Yeah, me neither. But this is the first book where I'm like, you know what? I could actually see myself reading this.
LMAO. What's interesting too is that there's the Netflix. There was a documentary on Ted Bundy, and I remember it was kind of like the same feeling as this movie, where you're like, how do they not catch this guy? It's like, well, because they've never dealt with serial killers before. No one really knew how to track them down or what to look for. Yeah. And I think that is, at least to me, it's very interesting. And so maybe to me, that's kind of why I'm compelled by this movie as well. But
the mythos of...
This is, the mythology of the Zodiac. No, it's a movie about obsessive people made by an obsessive director. What's funny too is that if you think about it, David Fincher probably put as much effort into this film as he did in The Panic Room. I just think this is the kind of story that David Fincher clicks better with in a movie like Panic Room.
Definitely.
That's just me personally.
Let me ask you this: would you who do you think did it?
What's your question?
Who do you think did it? Sorry, I had a little.
Who do I think
I had a
did
little
it?
brain fart.
Oh, I'd have to say Lee.
Well, what's interesting.
I think that most people who study the Zodiac nowadays say it's Lee. So,
what's cool though?
I have to go with the experts.
Going on the
what?
We were talking about the screenplay and the story structure a little bit, kind of coming back to that conversation. They kind of throw a curveball on you every now and then, and it's more than just a typical serial killer curveball. Where it's like, oh, we think it's this guy. No, actually, they were framing him. It's we originally are believed to think it's Lee, and then it's found that they try for 2 years. It's said to frame him, and they can't. So they start pursuing other leads, and they find the projectionist or they find someone who worked for the projectionist, I think, or something like that. He was a projectionist, but the guy they go to talk to is the theater owner. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So they go to the theater director, and then the theater director drops that line of, "This is my handwriting. I do all the posters." And I'm like, holy crap. and then it just immediately turns into a horror movie inside of a cop drama where I'm like, oh my god, Robert Graysmith is about to die. We're not about to get the book. And that amazing shot of, Gyllenhaal walking up to him and he's hearing the creaking above him, but is it pipes or is it somebody else?
Mm-hmm.
And then,
Mm-hmm.
the projection or the theater owner looks super ominous. He's got the lamp, the light above him. And then the way he turns off the light, and I'm like, oh my god, what is going on? I thought that was really smart because it throws us off of, wait, is the projectionist the thing? The guy?
Mm.
And then Graysmith comes back and is like, no, it's actually Lee. And then we're like, oh my god, who
Yeah.
is it actually? Was it multiple people? Was it, was it
Yeah.
copycats? Like, what is it? And I think that lends itself well to the mythology of the killings. So yeah, I love this movie. I would put it in the S tier.
Yeah, same.
Panic Room, I'm putting in the C tier.
Oh yeah, I probably would put it in C to B. High C, low B.
B minus C plus. Yeah, I buy that. Anything last thing you want to say on Zodiac before we move on to our final film of the evening?
No, I think, all right. I think I'm good. So let's
Cool.
move on to Curious Case of Benjamin Button. All right, Isaac, final thoughts on Curious Case of Benjamin Button?
So I know you said that this Zodiac is one of Fincher's magnum opus. Benjamin Buttons the second one, right? He peaked in these 2 years. Like, this is the peak of his career. These 2 years.
No, man, I said it was going to be Alien 3, the sequel.
Okay.
The
Alien 3
2.
2. Yeah, Benjamin Button. I have some things to say about this movie. It came on December of 2008.
Well,
Christmas time, actually. So this is a stereotypical Christmas
Nice.
movie.
nice.
And when I found out that fact, I was like, oh, okay, everything about the production of this movie makes a lot of sense. 71 on Rotten Tomatoes, 70 Metascore, 7.8 IMDb, $167 million budget, $335 million at the box office. Jesus Christ. Is it degrading to Forrest Gump to say that this is a less fun Forrest Gump?
A less fun Forrest
Like, who
Gump.
is insulted more by
That's
this?
hilarious.
By that statement?
Man, Tom Hanks really lost it.
This movie was 13 Academy Awards for it, including Best Picture, Director, Actor, Supporting Actress noms. It won in
Nominations.
and it won in art.
Nominations.
Yeah, sorry, it got nominated for those, and it won in art, makeup, and visual effects. This is just an Oscar bait movie.
First off,
I would let's just
First-
call a spade a spade. This is an Oscar bait movie.
this is totally an Oscar bait movie. Did you watch the whole
I-
movie?
Did and I regret it so much.
I honestly, part of me wants to say that I can't give a full review because I didn't watch all of it, but part of me also doesn't care because
How far did you get?
I got more than halfway through. I got to the point where he and Daisy are married.
Mm.
And then I was like, okay, here's the thing. I love movies. Like, I consider myself to be a cinephile.
You like movies?
For that reason,
I didn't know that about you.
for that reason, I try to treat them with respect. A lot of people put a lot of time, effort, and energy into making these movies.
Sure.
Whether they're good movies or bad movies, subjectively, or if you feel that it's even an objectively bad movie, people still put effort into it. That being said, every single time it cut back to the hospital room, I skipped ahead. And once they got married, I was like, I don't care anymore. And I started skipping ahead until I felt like I got some of the gist of what would have happened. but I was not looking forward to watching
No.
this because I just knew it was not going to be for me. I know people who say that this is their favorite David Fincher movie. Even some people who have said it's their favorite movie of all time. At least I know one person who says that. I don't know why they say it.
Well, this movie is made for a
nonetheless.
certain clientele. It's made for certain audience members. You know, it's not. This movie is not for me. This movie is not for. Let's be fair. This movie is not for me and you. We are not the target audience for this movie. This movie is the target audience for basically 30 plus year olds who, you know, have kids, want to spend a weekend, watch a cool movie. Brad Pitt, Kate Blanchett, some Mahershala Ali, Taja B. Henson. Like, we got some movie stars. It's a pretty cool kind of shtick to it with the whole reverse age. You know, there's good themes behind it, this and that, whatever. But at 2 hours and 46 minutes, we did not need to do that. I mean, Forrest Gump is what, 2.5? And it didn't feel like 2.5. And this movie is god awfully long. It is so terribly paced. And yeah, I cut you off. I'm sorry. What were you gonna say?
I was going to say that this movie isn't a less fun Forrest Gump. It's a more cinematic The Notebook.
That's another good that's that's good. That's another good comparison.
Yeah. I would still prefer watching The Notebook over this. Anyway.
Well,
it's The Notebook with better cinematography.
You know what the thing about those movies are, that it's like there's movies are I don't want to say they're fun to watch, but they're like there's some like it's either funny or there's amazing acting or there's, you know, like cool characters in them. You know, we're talking like the stereotypical romantic movies. This movie had none of it. Like, this movie, I don't think I laughed once. I don't think I was ever like, oh, Benjamin Button's a cool character. Or, you know,
He's kind of a boring person.
Yeah, Kate Blanchett, cool character. You know? I don't... Like, the whole thing about Forrest Gump is Forrest, Jenny, Lieutenant Dan, Bubba. Those are all his mom. Those are all fun characters. And, you know,
we're
basically watching a music video. But I don't know, man. This movie just was off. Ask me your question.
Okay, so let's actually talk about this movie seriously. How'd you feel about the acting?
I didn't like the acting, really. I thought Taja P. Am I saying that right? Taja P. Henson? I feel like I'm saying that wrong. Let me.
The character is Queen.
Let me double check her name. Taraja P. I'm sorry, Taraja, if you're listening. Taraja P. Henson.
Queenie. Queenie is the character.
Queenie. Yeah. She was the best actor in this movie.
She was good.
Yeah, she was the best actor in this movie.
She was probably one of the better actors.
That, like, stereotypical New Orleans, probably either former slave or family of slaves, you know, back then, you know, Southern. She really played that well. And I thought she's definitely the high of this movie. Everybody else?
Yeah,
No, I was not into anybody else's acting.
I think for me the big problem though is that the Benjamin Button is just a boring person.
Yeah,
he does interesting things. He travels around the world, but yeah.
I hate to keep comparing it to Forrest Gump, but it really struck me as a Forrest Gump knockoff because, you know, we're going through the decades and it's a love story, but. You know, Forrest Gump was like, I'm meeting John Lennon, and we get to see him meet John Lennon, and I get to fight in Vietnam, and he fought in Vietnam. You know, he was at a Black Panther party and punched a dude in the face, and we got to see that. He was the reason Nixon got resigned from office. Like, we got to see all these cool things he experienced. It wasn't just, let's hear Daisy or Brad Pitt narrate what he was doing over him on a bike. Like, it was just, I don't know.
To be fair, this movie is based on the book.
Sure.
That came out much prior to Forrest Gump.
This is an F. Scott Fitzgerald short story.
The plots... Yeah. Some of the details are different, just because it's a different time period. F. Scott Fitzgerald was writing before World War I pretty much even happened. No, it was before World War II, because he was writing in the 20s. Anyway, um, yeah, I think Brad Pitt does okay. The character just isn't interesting. You know, it's like he's a good actor, but I just didn't like watching the character do anything. Kate Blanchett is a good actress, but the character of Daisy was just annoying.
Yes.
Um, and especially later on in the film, I know I said I was skipping ahead, but later on in the film, she does the horrible thing of just staring at everything, and she just stares and looks sad at everything and doesn't do anything. And I was like, glad I'm not watching this all the way through.
Yeah, it was. This movie definitely suffers for Brad Pittism, my favorite ism. And this also made me realize something. Brad Pitt, at his best, isn't a leading man. He's either part of an ensemble like Ocean's, or he's playing off with somebody like Jonah Hill in Moneyball, Leo in Once Upon a Time, Fight Club 7. You know, he's playing off Morgan Freeman or Edward Norton. The only film I can think of that I think he was actually good, where he was the leading man, is maybe Inglourious Bastards, but I didn't even really like his performance that much in Inglourious Bastards.
I would still say Moneyball. I think he's the leading man in Money. He does the main character.
Yeah, definitely.
Because that, I think, and that's another example of a film though where, similar to David Fincher, the director is just somebody who can just get a good performance out of literally anyone.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that would be a good Brad Pitt movie. But okay, now the next topic of conversation. What do you think about the visual effects?
I mean, for 2008, it's not offensive or anything. They obviously have not aged well. It's very noticeable.
So yeah, I think.
But I will say, listen, it's 2008. I'm willing to excuse any movie that's over 10 years old. Almost 15 at this point. Jesus.
Yeah. The visual effects weren't bad looking. They just didn't play off. There's a specific scene where Benjamin Button walks into the street and he turns around to talk to Daisy. And there's just something about the lighting on his body that contrasts with the background that just looks bad.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, when it comes to the CGI for the older scenes, he himself doesn't look bad. The problem is that there's a smoothness to the movement of a CGI character that doesn't look real.
Yeah.
Humans don't move with the smoothness, the fluidity of a CGI character. And there are so many little moments where the old man Benjamin Button will just put on a hat, or he'll turn his head, or he just does something where I'm just like, he looks real, but his movement is CGI.
It's the opposite of Robert De Niro's problem in Irishman.
Yeah, where he moves differently than he's supposed to look. So that's really just for me. I mean, I give props, like I said with Panic Room. I'm glad David Fincher directed this movie, because who knows what someone else would have done with the visual effects. You know? Somebody else would have been like, let's show off the visual effects and we'll show an actual. There's no scene where he transforms, he just slowly, progressively becomes younger. Some other director would have been like, we got to show off our CGI. We're going to have like a werewolf transformation scene where he grows muscles or something like that, whatever. That would have been terrible. So I'm glad David Fincher was directing this movie. The problem is this movie is slow, long, and as much as I like slow and long movies, shout out to my top 10 list.
It's boring.
The story was not compelling enough to justify this movie being as long as it was. And this is a trope that I hope dies with our generation. But using a frame narrative and then cutting back to the original frame narrative progressively throughout the film That just has to like become illegal. I swear.
It needs to be in the Geneva Convention because Princess Bride is the only one who's been able to do it, and they've been able to do it right, and nobody else has been able to do it right. Probably
every time
ever in the history since Princess Bride.
Yeah. I'm not even joking when I say that I skipped ahead every time they
listen.
To the
I don't
hospital.
blame you because
I was like, I don't care.
Nothing is brought to those scenes.
The inherent problem with a frame narrative is that you don't care about the characters until you learn their whole story. So every time you cut back to them, it's like cutting back to somebody who we just don't know anything about yet. I mean, we know she's Daisy and we know the girl is her daughter, but it's like I don't yet care about these people. I don't have a reason to because the movie is called The Curious Case of Benjamin Button, not The Curious Case of the woman in the hospital room as her who's gonna die anyway. I don't care.
Yeah. Yep.
Her life story is so boring. I'm not surprised her daughter didn't just pull the plug on her at the end.
Can I just say something? Benjamin Button, kind of a beta. Well,
why you gotta say it like that though? He's just a boring person.
Am I allowed to?
He's a beta male.
The moment I was like, dude, this dude's
Brad
a total
Pitt,
beta.
My guy.
Is when he goes to see Daisy in Paris, right? And then she has that party and he sees her with the boyfriend. He walks off and I'm like, yeah, you know, we ain't no simps over here, man. Like, we're up. Like, keep your head up, king. She doesn't deserve you, right? And he walks out or whatever. And then she comes up and I'm like, nah, dude, just keep walking. Keep it cool. Keep it classy. Just keep going. Like, just do you, man. He turns around and I'm like, all right, he's going to tell her off. Like, he's going to be like, F you, you know, whatever. And then he's like...
He just comes back.
Like, no, I understand. And this and that. And I hope to see you back home. I'm like, dude, shut up. Like, you flew all the way to Paris to see her. And then she's... gonna dust you. I mean, I understand why she just dusted
New
him
York.
off. It's New York. I'm sorry. But still, he flew all the way over there. She dusted him off. Whatever. I guess I understand he didn't give her a heads up. I don't know. I've just been like, yeah, cool. See you later. Go do your thing. If you're ever in New Orleans, hit me up. You know where I'm at. You know where I live. Yada yada yada. But he's like, and I hope to see you and this and that. I'm like, dude, you're a freaking whip, man. And then he goes back to see her in Paris and I'm like, what the heck?
What's funny too is throughout the film he's like, yeah, I slept with a lot of girls.
For a broken leg, he goes to fly all the way to Paris because she got a broken leg. Like, she wasn't even dying, she had a broken leg. Yeah, I don't know. A lot of problems with quote unquote the knockoff Forrest Gump. Speaking of Forrest Gump, I looked into Eric Roth. You want to know the films that he's also written?
What else has he written?
So Forrest Gump. The Insider, directed by Michael Mann. Munich.
Okay, I was gonna say I hadn't heard of it. Munich. That's the Steven Spielberg. Right?
Yeah. That's the one about the. Is that the one about the Olympics?
The Olympic Games. Yeah.
Benjamin Button. And A Star Is Born.
Okay. The recent Star Is Born or the old Star Is Born?
No, the one with Lady Gaga. Has also wrote Extremely Loud and Incredibly Close, and has contributed. I don't know what contributed means.
The
Dune and Killers of the Flower Moon, the new Scorsese movie coming out in a couple years. So he's worked with some big names. So
he's basically just a good Oscar bait director.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, The Insider, Munich, Curious Case. I mean, these are all big name directors too.
Then they're not bad movies. You know, Forrest Gump is a good movie. Munich is a good movie. I don't watch Incredibly Loud. Don't watch Extremely Loud. Dune, I hope to be a good movie. You know, so by all means, I think he's a. But they're all Oscar bait movies.
And listen, there's nothing wrong with that. We're not saying if you like this movie that you have a problem with the filmmaking. This is just not our movie. This isn't for us. You know, everybody's entitled to their opinion. There are some cool things about this movie.
Except for people who like this movie.
If this is in your top three, you should get checked. No, I'm just kidding.
No. You know what though? I mean, it goes back to the quote I said earlier. Where David Fincher just he doesn't he wants to just make movies that might entertain
This
people.
is the this is
To a
the one for
certain
you.
degree, I also think that he almost intentionally made this movie knowing it was Oscar bait, and that's what he wanted. Because I mean, think about how he gets his career started with Seven. He makes a cult film with Fight Club, and maybe he didn't think that was good enough, so he tries to come back with Zodiac, but it flops. And then he's like, well, now the only way I can really stop myself from just being, the, TV movie, I'm going to end up on the ID channel just directing crime TV shows. He's like, I'm just going to make Oscar bait and it's going to get people's attention. And it did. I mean, you were even surprised at the box office for this movie. You were shocked when you read it out loud.
Yeah.
You were audibly surprised. So it worked. It got people to go and see it. You got people to say, hey, look, it's David Fincher making a movie. And then he makes Social Network and everything is right with the world. So we forgive him. I mean, yeah, the thing with David Fincher, sure, he likes CGI. This movie has a lot of CGI in it, and he experiments with that. It makes sense. In terms of cinematography, nothing in this movie stood out whatsoever. Nothing in particular stood out.
This one's going in the D tier.
Maybe that's it. Yeah, this wouldn't even be B tier for me. This would be F tier. Like I said, I don't like skipping through movies. I try to finish everything I watch, but I did not.
Yeah. Even if this movie could have been 30 minutes shorter, and this movie probably would have been a better movie.
If it was 30 minutes shorter, it would have been too long.
Just make it an hour and a half.
I hate to continue complaining about this movie. But if there's one thing about it that I will compliment it on, it's that it is confident in the type of movie it is. And I think that comes from the strength of David Fincher.
Yeah.
There is no part in this film where you feel like any of the directorial or cinematography decisions or production decisions feel out of place. It feels like they were all on the same page. They all knew what kind of film they were going to take or the kind of film they were going to make. And I feel like for a lot of people, most people don't like romantic drama films or just Oscar bait movies like this because it feels like they're trying to be something else. And I feel like this movie just has its vibe and it just wants to sit there in the corner and vibe with itself, and you can join it if you want. But if you don't vibe with it, then you have other films you can watch, go ahead. So I think I'll just go rewatch Zodiac instead of Benjamin Button, What can you do?
I agree.
But I respect Fincher for making it.
Yeah, kind of. But yeah. We'll leave it at that.
Because for a fact, the next episode we record, we're going to spend a whole hour on Social Network. Anyway,
yeah, Social Network and Gone Girl are probably going to take up most of our time.
Anyway. Any final thoughts on Benjamin Button? Any last words?
No.
As we
I don't want to
talk
keep
about this movie again.
I don't want to keep harping on it
for the rest of our lives.
Not really. No. Has good art direction. He does some interesting things with the camera, but not my cup of tea. So I'll just leave it at that.
Yeah, same.
So we're at hour 43. You want to talk about Silverstone?
Formula One. Yeah, sure. Why not? Cool. Okay, so you might not be used to this, but Verstappen has a bit of a habit crashing out on the first lap of races. And so when that happened on lap 1, I was like, okay, cool, we're doing this again. You know, what can you do? That being said, though, you were probably the most disappointed in this race than I was. As a Verstappen fan, I always expect him to crash out on lap 1. I'm never surprised when it happens. But you're a Ferrari fan. You probably felt like you died watching this.
Yes and no. I was, when I actually woke up a little late, so I when I woke up and I saw Leclerc first and Verstappen out, I was like, what the hell did I miss? So I had to go and find, YouTube videos and stuff like that. I'm like, what did I just miss? But when I saw Leclerc was first, and then I was like, well, where's Hamilton? And then I saw Hamilton was 5th. I was like, we're losing this race. I was like, as long as we're on the podium for one of our people, as long as one of our drivers is on the podium, and because Bottas at the time was 3rd, so I was like, damn, we're really about to lose this race. We might be 3rd. I was like, if Sainz can finish top 5, I'll be okay. So we got the podium. We got 2nd, which was better. I thought we were gonna get 3rd, but Bottas just never caught up. And
Oops, sorry.
Sainz never passed Ricardo, which was kind of a disappointment. But
he just had bad pit stops.
Yeah, that pit stop really killed him. So it happens. This is racing. Ferrari is back? Question mark. Oh man.
What's funny too is that if you watched it, Hamilton basically kicks Verstappen off the track. I thought it was a racing incident, by the way. They gave him a penalty. Okay, cool, whatever. I would have considered it a racing incident because it's lap 1 and Hamilton was just between a rock and a hard place, and I couldn't fault him for taking any decision. His decisions, his choices were basically bump into Verstappen, and what's the worst that can happen? He crashes, or he just loses control and then ends up in 2nd place. Mm-hmm. Or he just slows down into the car behind him and crashes into the wall. It's like, I don't know. I thought it was a racing incident. They gave him a penalty for it. Whatever. He won anyway, so it didn't mean anything.
Everybody was upset. Yeah.
But if you watch it, well, yeah, him winning doesn't mean anything. Like, the penalty doesn't mean anything because he won. But everyone was like, the penalty is not harsh enough. He shouldn't have won, basically. Give him a 30-second stop and go or something ridiculous like that. But if you watch back, you'll see that he trips Verstappen, and Verstappen goes off track, and immediately Leclerc comes out of nowhere and passes Hamilton, and then they yellow flag it. And then, like, literally the second Leclerc gets ahead of Hamilton, they yellow flag the race, and you can't overtake during a yellow flag. So Leclerc, like, just barely capitalized on the right opportunity to get in the first place. And I remember watching that, and I was like, he was probably watching Verstappen go into the barrier like, see ya.
It's like, not my problem.
See ya. Thanks for the lead, losers.
Yeah, as a recent F1 fan of, I think, at this point, 2 months, I can understand why people are upset with Lewis. Do I think he did it intentionally? Absolutely not. I don't think any of these guys are trying to kill each other on the road, especially with cars that go almost 200 miles per hour. But, this stuff happens. It's racing. The penalty, I think it was okay. I don't think he should have done anything more, and I think anything less, you're kind of inviting people to just be like, well, if I nudge my, the guy in front of me, I'm only going to get a 5-second penalty, or I might not even get a penalty. It's like, no. And I think last week, the stewards are kind of showing that they're more strict on hard racing. So, the thing that I always appreciate, and it's the reason why I hate the NBA right now, is because there's consistency with their rulings. And there's no consistency in the NBA. And there's, the past 2 weekends at least, there's been consistency. people were always up in arms about the Norris and then Checo doing it twice. And people were like, well, why are they
Yeah,
keep getting
seriously.
penalties? It's like, well, once the first penalty is set, you have that to base yourself off of.
There's the precedent. Yeah.
You can't really get mad at the stewards for upholding their consistency,
Hmm.
I thought it was kind of funny that Verstappen, as soon as he was able to, he's like, yeah, I'm good. I'm glad I'm okay. Watching the at-home celebration and little not classy. Not classy, guys. I'm paraphrasing, but he's like, it's a little bit disrespectful. I was like, I kind of agree with it. Hamilton was acting like he started from the back of the pack,
or he worked for the.
Yeah, he acted like he didn't have a car, and he was like running on foot to beat all these guys. Like, dude, just show a little bit of humility. Like, hey, I'm sorry that, what happened with Max happened with Max. I'm sorry. There was nothing I could do, but I'm proud for the team for fighting back and getting the win. That's all he had to say, and everybody would be okay. I mean, obviously there would be people who would be stupid and still be upset, but for him to not even really acknowledge Max after the race was, I don't know, it kind of just left a sore spot of like, oh, this is why people don't like you. Like,
he basically
kind of
didn't lead a lap in the entire. Yeah. He didn't lead a lap in the entire race, and then he passes Leclerc as soon as Leclerc has engine problems.
Yeah.
And he goes super slow, and then he wins the race. And it's like, Hamilton's a good driver. It's the British Grand Prix, so he's going to celebrate it anyway. Him having the penalty earlier in the race and knocking Verstappen off the track like that, I think was just, I don't know. Maybe he should have acknowledged it. I'm going to be honest with you. Whenever I see the podium, if it has Hamilton, Bottas, or Verstappen, then I just don't bother watching past the checkered flag. I'm like, I don't need to. Interviews, celebrations. I don't care for any of that stuff. If it has Gasly or Norris on the podium, you bet I'm watching up until they give them the trophies. But other than that, I don't care.
Yeah.
So Hamilton could have gotten up there and been like, hey guys, I'm the second coming of Jesus, and Scientology is true. I wouldn't have cared. I wouldn't have seen it. But yeah, no, who cares? I mean, he's only 10 points behind Verstappen in the championship now, so we got some work to do.
And they're only 4 points back from in the constructors. So
yeah,
I'm happy because it makes the season more interesting, because there's gonna be this petty drama between the teams. And
but
the drivers.
Okay, here's the thing. Alan Prost, who a super old school driver, old champion from the 80s, he was teammates with Senna. He said that the relationship between Hamilton and Verstappen is going to play out exactly as it did with Senna and himself, which is basically, for those who don't know, Ayrton Senna is basically considered one of the greatest Formula One drivers of all time. Alan Prost was his teammate, so how do you think he feels? Well, anyway, Prost said that, and what's funny too is that both of them were basically championship contenders while they were teammates, but everyone remembers Senna, and only Formula One fans remember Prost. Yeah. Basically, let me tell this story. I sidetrack myself. Prost said that lap 1, they will fight for first place, and then one car is going to get ahead, and that's going to be it. And they're just going to have to contend with whatever happens on lap 1. Other than that, though, the championship will just get to whoever can outlive the penalties. And Prost and Senna have a very famous incident where they almost intentionally crashed into each other on the first corner of a race.
I think I've seen that one, yeah.
Because they were just so mad. They were so mad at each other because they were just rivals for the championship. And they both intentionally crashed into each other. And I think that crash itself basically took Prost out of the points for the championship that year, if I remember correctly. But anyway, yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to watch Hamilton actually have to fight for a championship, because he really hasn't had to since like 2016 or so. But as somebody who has been a fan of Verstappen for a while, he has a bad habit of crashing out on lap one. So I would be more comfortable if he had, a bigger gap to Hamilton. That would make me comfortable, because then he can crash out
Again.
More than one time. Yeah. Now it's like if he crashes out, he just loses the championship.
Yeah. It's a tricky.
But
it's gonna be a tricky run to the end.
Yeah. If there's any driver though who I think is just consistent, Hamilton and Verstappen are both very consistent drivers. Bottas is pretty consistent too. You might say consistently bad, but he said, I don't know if you know this, but Bottas said that he had no water.
Yeah.
The whole race.
Yeah.
And it was like 100-something degrees
on the track.
Out on the track.
I did hear
that. Is just.
I think I read or heard him talking about it. Yeah, it's pretty.
That is ridiculous.
I don't know how they do it.
At least he got a podium. It's happened to. I remember it happened to Alonso one time, where he was like. He's like passed out because he was so dehydrated. Just after the race, he got out of the car and just fainted.
Jesus.
It's it's a lot more. Being a race car driver is a bit more wearing down on your body than I think people give it credit for being.
How do you feel about Red Bull's chances? Sure. You feeling the same?
I think they still have I still feel the same, especially if Mercedes isn't working on their car like they say they are. They say they're not working on their car. If that's true, then I think Red Bull has a chance. For sure. Will they win the championship? Part of me still wants to say no. Mercedes and Hamilton they understand this era better than anyone. And so it was the same with Schumacher in the 90s. He just knew how to drive the car, and Ferrari just knew how to make the car better than anyone else. So you can't fault them for understanding the sport better than anyone else. And you can't fault Hamilton for just being a better driver than anyone else,
Yeah.
So Verstappen is good. He has a chance to even if Hamilton takes the championship back from him, like whenever they race next, even if Hamilton wins, I still think Verstappen could take it back. But I think Hamilton will win the championship. That's just me personally.
They're in Hungary next,
That's
right?
Just me personally.
Is it Hungary?
I have no idea. Hopefully it's not, because that's a bad race.
IT, get on that real quick. Tim, pull that up for us.
You mean you Googling it?
No. I have my own guy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it should be exciting. Any last words? Let's get out of here, man. It's already been 2 hours. Any last words before we go?
Yeah, seriously. No, let's leave.
Cool. All right, well, this was Hit Play. David Fincher in the 2000s. A little bit of Formula 1 at the end. See you guys next week. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody.